A fabled dwarven stronghold, the capital of industry of the Four Kingdoms, full of foundries and bustling business. This is the city of Blackwall. Hi, my name's Ross Watson. I am the lead designer of Myth, Tales of Legend.
And I'm James DeFogie, and I'm the lead writer of Myth, Tales of Legend.
And we hope you guys are staying safe out there during all this. We value our fans. What's today's episode about, James?
So we're going to look at one of the Four Kingdoms. We're going to look at Blackwall, and we're just going to give you some more setting information on kind of what we're developing and what we're doing with these places that have been on the map of Myth, but they may have had one or two adventures set there. But we, in a role-playing game, we have to expand those out into a setting, and so we're going to talk about one of these places today, Blackwall.
Yeah, Blackwall it's a kingdom and it's a city.
It is.
It's two things.
Yeah.
Now on the map, of course, it's a region, and it's actually not far away from the wasteland of the Risen.
Yeah.
In fact, that wasteland kind of cuts them off.
Mm-hmm.
It isolates them, not entirely. I mean, you can still get to and from, right? You can walk in and out.
Yeah, you can still get to Blackwall. You can head down, through the sea or take some of the southern trading routes. But to get to the north, and really the most direct path to things like some of the Dwarven kingdoms, or even the most direct path, say, to Farronrock, that's cut off by this wasteland of the Risen.
Okay, so most of what I was reading about was related to the city, with the eponymous city of Blackwall. But actually, now I have a question. Like if you're not in the city, but you're in the kingdom, and you're in some kind of small village somewhere, are those distinctly different than other villages in the rest of the Four Kingdoms? I would imagine not.
Not so much. Blackwall, as you mentioned in sort of our introduction, we've kind of made sort of the capital of industry. Right, we have the reason it's called Blackwall is there's so much. The foundries are running so often that the soot has sort of stained the walls of the city. So I would say that the villages kind of in that region, they deal more with the unholy, right? The wasteland of the Risen is right there, and they sort of benefit first from these tinkerer and engineer inventions that kind of come out of Blackwall. So maybe your town, instead of being just like every other town in the Four Kingdoms, your guards, they have muskets. Maybe they have some black powder weapons. Maybe you have this great bell that was forged in the foundry of the city. You're going to have a little bit more of those engineering advantages, but still, you're a town in the middle of, not nowhere, but in the middle of the wilderness. So, there's going to be some uniformity across the Four Kingdoms there.
Okay, well, Let's talk about the city then, because I think that when you're talking about the kingdom, 90% of the time you're actually talking about the city.
I would agree.
When we talk about the other kingdoms, maybe Farronrock is sort of the one. The other place is kind of like this, but most of the time you're just talking about the city of Blackwall, which I definitely see in my mind's eye has really tall, soot-stained, thick bastion fortress type walls around it. Like this is a series, almost like Minas Tirith in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Maybe squat, maybe a little more squat, and a little more blocky. But
and it sits more on a coast. You've got these, the harbor of Blackwalls, and when we talked about titles and backgrounds, right? Blackwaller as one of your backgrounds. This is somebody who identifies with the city. That is right. Part of their core identity. And so if you're from Blackwall, that means something to you.
I keep comparing it to a Bostonian.
Yeah.
I'm not from Boston. I'm a Bostonian, or I'm a Texan, not from Texas. Yeah, the Blackwallers have an identity of their own.
Yeah.
Now, some of that comes from growing up in a fairly maze-like environment. There's a lot of streets and alleys, and it wasn't laid out on a grid.
No. We have Blackwall was one of those cities that was destroyed at one point and rebuilt, and it was rebuilt with the help of the dwarves from this kingdom to the north. One of the two dwarven holds, and so as they were rebuilding, they didn't rebuild everything at the same rate or in the same style. There have been some sort of calamities in recent memory, so you have this very Gotham-esque warren of narrow streets, buildings that sometimes are a little too close. Maybe they're leaning a little bit against each other. But yeah, it's a city that you inhabit, that you don't live in, if that makes sense. Like, it sort of is always around you and above you.
Now there's a pretty major harbor that's part of the city. It actually has its own like section.
Yes.
When we talk about the city, so there's probably districts, and like the harbor district, I imagine, has got kind of a smell to it.
Yeah, we kind of broke Blackwall into 3 main districts. There are obviously other parts of Blackwall, but the ones that we talked, so the harbor is one, and it's possibly the nicest part of Blackwall. There's this great seawall that they've enclosed in this bay. They've got cannonades. There are Naga attacks, and really, they've repulsed most of these Naga attacks. There's this sense of the harbor is secure. But
there's these 2 great lighthouses, 2 big-ass lighthouses called the Sisters.
Yeah.
And it's also where the Thieves Guild hangs out. And this is the nicest part of town. I'm not sure I want to live there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you've got, I mean, the heart is the foundry, sort of kind of sitting north of the harbor, but yeah, the harbor has the, you know, the smell of the sea, the smell of the markets, the trade is coming in and out of here. There's a strong presence of, you know, the guard that stands on the walls. But it is covered in soot, and any place that you have a large amount of trade, you are going to have the Thieves Guild here. And yeah, we do. I believe we called them, is it?
The Sooters.
The Sooters, yeah.
The Sooters. And they have a leader, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah. Now, here's a question, though, so where do the rich people live? Do they live is there a section of the harbor that's like cleaner and higher and has better wind, and that's where they live?
Yeah, so they mainly live on the western side of the city. So they live on the western side of the harbor. They live on the western side of the heart, mainly because the eastern side of the city had this earthquake that struck. And so the eastern side of the city, while still in the city walls, the dwarven walls did not shift or break. We cannot say that was the same thing for like that district in the city. So the eastern side of the city is known as the Warrens, and like there are buildings have fallen over, streets have shifted, part of the city sunk down. So the rich and the nobility of Blackwall sort of moved further into the west, because the Warrens are just they're this chaotic tumble. Some people think that there were either crawler tunnels or Hurani Warrens that sort of contributed to this collapse, and there are a bunch of these people now in the Warrens. And so the sort of the further west you go in Blackwall, the more affluent the neighborhoods.
All right, now let's talk about the Warrens for a second. So earthquake strikes, screws up a big part of the city.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you get a lot of buildings that are tumbled almost against each other, and it's haphazardly, it's dangerous. A lot of people died in that earthquake. And because they're so close to the wasteland of the Risen, I'm assuming that they had some pretty serious problems about unholy rising up out of the graves. And there's a guild in the Warren, the Reposers Guild, that takes care of the unholy.
Yeah, and I love this idea of this group of people who have taken it upon themselves to like keep the unholy contained. We have a number of organizations kind of scattered throughout Myth, but this is a very local and personal sort of guild, right? They go into the Warrens, they go into this dangerous place, and some of them are in it for the money, some of them are in it because they're Blackwallers and they don't want to see the unholy sort of spread out, and some of it are in it because they know there are people still living in the Warrens, and they go in and they hunt unholy and whatever else happens to come up, but they kind of put these things back into the ground where they belong.
All right, so if the unholy are a big problem, and they are, how has this affected burial practices in Blackwall? When people die, I assume there's a protocol, probably a law that says...
Yeah, so in my mind, the rich and those who can afford it are cremated, right? The city of Blackwall is well defined by its walls, so it's not like you have a lot of space to interre your dead.
So cremation is kind of mandated.
Cremation is mandated. If we want to go really grimdark, kind of in my head, there are probably like for the poorer parts of the city, there are every 2 weeks we have the bonfire going.
Bring out your dead.
Bring out your dead. Which is sort of, for the poor areas of Blackwall, things like wakes become we call them wakes because we want to make sure the person's dead. There's vigils for the dead to make sure. Listen, if Aunt Susie rises before the kind of the neighborhood ovens are ready, somebody's got to take care of them. And so the Reposers Guild kind of act as these vigil organizers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that actually leads me to my next question, which is about religion. What religions are common, if any, in Blackwall?
We haven't talked a whole lot about this, but there are obviously the Hurani. They love Blackwall, especially the Warrens. It sort of is kind of like a surface version.
A shadow.
Yeah, it's sort of a surface version of where they love to live anyway. And so there's a large cult of shadow in the Warrens. But as you may imagine, the Morning Lord, especially with his stance against the unholy, everyone at least makes some sort of obeisance, some sort of, it's the equivalent of sort of crossing yourself or, having that rosary or that medal of Saint Michael that you can kind of invoke the Morning Lord against the unholy, because the unholy are really the enemy within and without, right? To the north, Bones, who is this great boss from the board game that we have stats for in the game. Bones is raising the wasteland of the Risen. It is assembling this army, and it is currently cut off. Like it used to be in the West, you had Gramrock and Blackwall, and they were the bastions of civilization, and they worked together. And the dwarves shared engineering and learning with the humans, and the humans of Blackwall had sort of the capacity and the population to put these things in larger practice. And then the Wasteland of the Risen springs up, and suddenly these two allies they're not cut off, but caravans are fewer, and the track north and south is much more dangerous. And so the Morning Lord is definitely one of those like iconic gods in Blackwall because of its protection against the unholy.
Okay. Now, if I wanted to buy some really good stuff, I would go to the Heart.
Yes.
Right. The Heart is not only where you have the foundries. It's basically the industrial district, but it's also the commercial district. Mm-hmm. Right. This is also where I go and there's a bazaar, or there's a guy who's showing off all the finest. I almost imagine like those streets in London where you can go, find the finest suits on the one side of the road and the finest firearms on the other side of the road.
And then the old bookshop that's been there for like 200 years that is just filled with all sorts of crazy things that you would never find anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Heart is, commercially speaking, the Heart, I imagine, is one of the top places in the Four Kingdoms to go to find the thing that you want to buy.
Yes. And sort of, so Blackwall they know they're not the richest kingdom or city. That really kind of is the Riverlands. And they may not be the most refined, right? Canis has this history and this understanding of knowledge. But when it comes to producing things and producing the best version of things, there might be artificers located somewhere else in the Four Kingdoms who spend their entire life on one piece that is better than what the foundries of Blackwall turn out. But in that time, Blackwall has turned out, 300 of these things, and they're all functional. And they're the reliable source. And the Heart, one of the things I love about it, never sleeps. Like the whole point is that the heart of Blackwall keeps beating. Any time of day, any time of year, you can go to the Heart and you can find what you're looking for the right price.
Okay, so if I want the Stradivarius of crossbows, I would go find that particular master.
Yes.
But if I wanted like a really good crossbow that I could just purchase off the shelf, go to the Heart.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Now, the last place we want to talk about here is the Knot.
So, for those of you familiar with the Myth board game, you may already know what I'm talking about. So the Knot came out of part of what we did is our design process and development process for Myth is we went through and we read all of the adventures for the board game. And one of the adventures talks about the Knot. And I'm like, this is too good not to put in to the game. And so basically once a year for a very limited time, this door to this ancient subterranean complex from the Age of Legends opens up. And all of Blackwall goes crazy. We've made a festival called the Festival of Untying. People just show up and they it is this time of rest and relaxation and partying and booths and vendors. They all get set up.
It's Blackwall Mardi Gras.
It is. It's Blackwall Mardi Gras. And treasure hunters from all over the Four Kingdoms show up because basically there's this rumor that the Knot holds this vast wealth and this vast treasure hoard from the Age of Legends. But the problem is, it's not just called the Knot because it's a clever name to describe it. The dungeon keeps shifting. This complex, like even going in, you can't just retrace your steps. And every year there are treasure hunters who never make it back. But there's always just enough people who pull just enough artifacts and gold out of this thing that next year it gets even bigger. And so there are like the factions that we've talked about in previous Myth episodes. They hire adventurers to go into the Knot. Maybe someone in the Bibliosofts discovers some ancient scroll that talks about this one thing that they need pulled out of the Knot. Maybe your adventurers are the ones that they come to and say, hey, here's what we know. All we need you to do is go in, get this, and come back out. So yeah, it's this sort of festival. It's a way to mark time in Blackwall, but it's also this kind of community thing where everyone comes together. There are bets that are placed on treasure hunters, treasure hunter teams that make it out and come back next year. They live as rock stars in Blackwall for that year. So basically take all of the celebrity culture in Blackwall, it's tied up in those who participate in Knot runs.
Okay, so that's awesome. I love it. I kind of want to do a whole product about the Knot now. But the next thing, we have to keep talking about the city. So the people in charge of the city, there's a council that runs Blackwall. And I assume it's elected.
We haven't really gone into that, but you have some hereditary seats and some elected seats and some seats that are, violently vacated and someone new has to be put into position. So having
there's a current.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say having a seat on a council is a big deal. Having a patron who has a seat on the Council of Blackwall, if your heroes can get to that is the gravy train, right? Yeah, exactly. They have the funds, they have access to the heart in a way that you didn't even know existed as just like people in the city. So yeah. And
there's the head of the council, which is Counselor Merrim.
Counselor Merrim. She is a dwarf. She's sort of the only dwarf on the Blackwall Council. She's been here long enough that she's sort of like her name is sort of synonymous with the council. She's the one who sort of out of her own pocket funds the Reposers. She has a special hatred of the unholy, and she wants it dealt with. She doesn't want she sort of uses the Reposers as kind of a recruitment by fire. Those who can survive in the Reposers, maybe they're the ones who get put on the next caravan going north to Gramrock. You've proven that you can handle the unholy. I need this message to get through. I need this group of supplies to get through. Congratulations on your promotion.
Now, she's got a lung condition because she's lived in the city for a long time, which I think is a fun little detail where she's like...
Yeah, and she doesn't know how much time she has left. So, like, her life's goal is to get these trade routes back open. And because of living in, both underground at Gramrock, dealing with the Wasteland of the Risen, being, like, really involved in the Foundry, it's sort of settled into her lungs, and we don't know how long she has. So it kind of adds a timer that you as the GM can kind of set for how intensely is she pursuing these goals. Another person that I love is the Frayed. The Frayed is this Hurani prophet, kind of this Cassandra figure that is sort of always found in the Warrens, ringing her bell, kind of, the sign that the end is nigh, and everyone's sort of, all right. But she is convinced that the Rat King, so the Rat King is the king of the Tailless, which if you go back and look in our videos or play the board game, they're sort of the major Hurani threat. She's convinced that the Rat King is coming for the Warrens, and actually believes believes that the Warrens may have a back way into the knot that is not sort of dependent on this annual opening. So she is this figure that you get to interact with. Is she crazy? Is there actually a threat? Is she just saying that, yeah, there's something down there just to get people down there?
Speaking of are they crazy or not, we have Professor Paris. And Professor Paris, he has actually left the Academy of Learning 5 years ago because one of his apprentices, his student was Rusty Sprocket, who is this big figure. We'll have to talk more about Rusty Sprocket in the future, but essentially Rusty Sprocket's infamous, and the infamy is what led Professor Paris to be like, I'm leaving the Academy and I'm going to Blackwall. And when he gets to Blackwall, he's like, so what I'm going to do while I'm here is I'm going to set up a lab and basically start tinkering with TikToks. And he's got kind of a clockwork, I don't know, it's a cavalcade of stuff, like a circus almost, that he's just like constantly building new things and working on new designs and testing them.
If we go, when we bring TikToks in as possibly a player, when we do, Paris's TikToks could be kind of the start of that player species, right? He sort of blames himself for what Rusty Sprocket did, and is trying to set the world right.
Well, it would be if you took the background that gives you a mentor, a connection.
Yes.
That would be a great background for a TikTok character to have. Is I was built by Professor Paris. He's still around. I can still contact him, and kind of like Data and Dr. Soong. You can be like, I know this guy is out there. I can talk to him.
It's a great reference, by the way.
Thank you. And that leads us to Gentleman Jack.
Oh, so Gentleman Jack is. So the Sooters kind of started off in my mind as sort of that Oliver Twist style gang in the harbor. Yes. And Gentleman Jack has moved in, and he wants to bring a level of refinement. He has sort of this romantic idea of what a thieves guild should be. And if you agree with him, that is fantastic. And if you don't, he is not above violence to ensure that this romantic and gentlemanly view of... And so he's sort of raising the quality of the thieves guild, which is both, good on one hand and also awful on the other. And... I love the idea of sort of this guy who's taking these, the Sooters. It's not a great name for a thieves guild of like refined elite thieves. And he's sort of like month by month kind of refining them into what he grew up in, his vision of what an organization of refined Robin Hood-esque, rob from the rich, keep most of it for ourselves, and then hand it out to someone else. What it should be. So that even the Thieves Guild in Blackwall is sort of undergoing this modernization and this refinement in the city of Foundries.
I'm really intrigued by him because I feel like he's got a code of, maybe not honor, but a code of behavior that he follows, a code of conduct. Yeah. And he is, he's got his rules.
He does.
And I feel like, that when one of his guys steps out of line, he's like, bad form, old fellow.
That's right.
Like, stabs him through the heart.
Bad form is definitely going to be his quote.
Right? That's just not done. That's not the done thing.
Yeah.
Right? He's got a very cool grasp to him, which is going to lead to the final thing I was going to ask, which is, What are some things that you would use, or what would you do with Blackwall in your game? And the first thing I thought of was I would want to, I want to explore Gentleman Jack's code, find out what that is. B, I want to definitely organize a trip for the Mardi Gras, the day of unraveling or untying. And those are the things that really come to my mind. But what are some things that you would do to set in your game of Myth, Tales, and Legend?
All right, so I know I mentioned Gotham before. I think that like you could very easily run an entire campaign just set in Blackwall, or a series of adventures where it's sort of this more urban. How do you tell the light from the dark in a city that is so stained by soot and grime? I love the idea that something is going on with the Warrens, and maybe starting off the group as, at the end of the first adventure or so, having them come to the Reposers Guild's attention and saying, hey, all right, listen, we need people to go into the Warrens and do this. There's coin and there's food in it for you. Oh.
What if it starts out at like a vigil? Like they're going to Blackwall because a friend there died. Organizing the vigil is a guy from their repose. He's like, well, when your friend died, he was looking into this thing.
That is a great lead in. And then bringing in the Frayed. I love this idea of the wind and world wearied prophet who maybe sees things clearer but just can't articulate it. And so most people in the city, maybe even the first couple of times you introduce them, get the PCs to be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Why is this person following us? Wait, you remember when they said that one thing? Isn't that what just happened? Maybe they do know what's going on, and making the Frayed like an acolyte of Shadow, and kind of like exploring
the Shadow.
Shadow. I think that could be a lot of fun.
So Blackwall's awesome. Great work, JM, on writing this all up. My input on this was fairly limited, honestly, but I'm really excited to see what you did on it, and it looks fantastic. So people, when the product comes out, I imagine people are going to be really thrilled with the setting that we've created. And one of the little pieces is this. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this needs its own product. It's just that good.
Yeah, I would love to just do a small Blackwall product. I would even love to just have like rules for how the knot changes while you're in it. I think that would be great for a GM. Hey, yeah, you guys went in the knot. We turn around. Yeah, that wall's gone. What do you mean that wall's gone? Yeah, no, there's no way back. You have to find a new way back. I mean, the knot brings out my old school sort of like evil cackling dungeon master like ideas start to roll through my head.
That's true. So first of all, thanks to all you guys for watching. Yes. And if there's anything we talked about today that you would like to hear more about, anything in Blackwall or beyond, please drop us a line in the comments. That's our favorite place to read what you're interested in. And be sure to check out some of the other shows that are on the Ulysses channel. We've got the Ulysses Worlds episodes, which we're talking to different creators in the Ulysses line, like myself and Bill Bridges and other people. Hopefully we'll get you on there, James.
I would love to.
And there's a show all about Robert Aguchi is doing stuff on the Dark Eye and Aventuria, and JM, the GM, is running his live plays of Tord, the Four Horsemen, in which I am also a player, and
Curse of the Abandoned. It's our new arc for Fading Suns. If Annals of Antioch was sort of exploring this lost world and kind of how things have fallen away from the known worlds, Curse of the Abandoned is sort of delving into sort of the seedier side of the known worlds. One of the players was like, "This feels like a Firefly adventure." I'm like, "Cool, I'll take it." Like, they're investigating a pirate haven and the cult that was kind of started the whole Annals of Antioch thing. They're in the middle of dealing with a pirate captain who's training to be in this sort of this blood sport, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So we've just started that off. By the time this one goes live, we'll probably be 4 or 5 sessions into it.
That's right. You can catch us here every Thursday at noon, And this is the Campfire Chats. So until next time,
Keep telling stories.